The condition of Gon in comparison to Hisoka, focusing especially on post-death Nun, analyzing along with all this the experiences of both, what Gon went through, what Hisoka faced. I can prove to you that Gon developed something new in his Nun, including the power of Nanika alongside his own Nun. Could Gon be a future calamity? Want to know more? Come with me, hurry up and subscribe. Leave your like and activate the bell. Gon Freaks' journey is, without a doubt, one of the most intense and emotionally charged in all of Hunter x Hunter. From the beginning, his free spirit, unwavering determination, and genuine desire to become a hunter and find his father already set him apart as a protagonist destined to live great adventures. However, no arc in his story demonstrates the complexity of Nun, willpower, and psychological consequences as much as the moment when Gon, in an act of desperation, makes an extreme vow to gain enough power to face Neferpitou, one of the most dangerous Chimera ant guardians. This choice marks a profound turning point in his trajectory, and its consequences reverberate to this day, leaving a complex legacy about what true power means, the cost of wishes, and what Nun can become. When analyzing Gon's current condition, it is impossible not to draw parallels with Hisoka, another character whose relationship with death and Nun is as enigmatic as it is fascinating. Hisoka died and came back to life, and this experience seems to have altered his perception, fighting style, and even the nature of his Nun. This resurrection brings elements of renewal, overcoming, and a possible evolution in Nun capabilities, which can serve as a counterpoint to what happened with Gon, whose transformation was not by returning from death, but by self-imposing an extreme vow that completely drained his vitality and Nun energy. During his fight against Neferpitou, Gon sealed a pact with himself that surpassed all known limits. He offered his entire life and future in exchange for a momentary power capable of defeating the enemy. This desperate and drastic decision brought him overwhelming, destructive, almost inhuman strength, but at the cost of his own existence. After the fight, Gon was found in critical condition, on the verge of death, without Nun and unable to even move. This state led many fans to wonder if Gon could return to any previous level of power, or if his life would never go back to normal, since he apparently gave his potential and essence to the vow. Hisoka, whose trajectory is also marked by deaths and resurrections, had a different experience. His resurrection was shrouded in mystery, carried out by Krallo Lucifer, the leader of the Phantom Troop, and brought a version of Hisoka more cruel, calculating, and relentless. His Nin seems to have undergone a transformation not only in combat style, but in the intensity of its use, with techniques that adapt more dynamically to situations, as well as more refined and aggressive control. Hisoka seems to have evolved into a more complete fighter, with a Nun that not only sustains his unpredictable style, but also reflects his will to survive and dominate his opponents. This experience indicates that death, when overcome, can profoundly alter the user's relationship with Nun, creating new possibilities and paradigms. When comparing the two, it becomes clear that Gon and Hisoka represent two distinct paths regarding post-death or post-extreme vow Nun. Gon, by sacrificing his existence to gain instant power, was left in a state of total vulnerability, without access to Nun and unable to continue his journey as a hunter. On the other hand, Hisoka, who also faced death, returned with an even more dangerous and effective Nun, indicating a kind of rebirth that strengthens and enhances the user. A question that naturally arises is whether Gon could develop something new in his Nun from this extreme experience. Would it be possible that, instead of simply losing his power, he might manifest a more complex Nun based on vows, restrictions, or even a transformed form of his aura? Kurapika, for example, is a clear example of how a Nun vow can generate immense strength, but at the cost of severe limitations and risks. He created a pact that conditions his power on revenge against the members of the Phantom Troop, restricting the use of his abilities to that purpose, and thus drastically amplifying his strength in that context. Gon could follow a similar path, becoming a user whose Nun depends on a rigid pact, perhaps based on his will to protect those he loves, or his desire to redeem himself for the cost of his previous vow. His Nun could take on new forms or functions, perhaps involving more absolute control of life energy, manipulation of time, or a fusion of power and sacrifice that reflects his suffering and determination. This evolution would bring not only a gain in strength, but moral and emotional complexity, since it would keep Gon bound to severe conditions and personal dilemmas. Furthermore, his Nun could hypothetically assume an almost symbiotic role, much like what happens with Nanika in Aluka, where the user's power and will blend with an external force that demands balance and control. Gon might come to depend on this connection to activate his powers, becoming a character whose maximum strength is tied to an entity or to a delicate emotional and physical state, creating a constant internal conflict. However, the narrative also suggests that Gon's power recovery would not be simple or automatic. The sacrifices he made, his post-vow state, and the consequences of extreme nin use indicate that the return of his power will require a process of reconstruction, perhaps involving training, emotional maturation, and overcoming physical and psychological trauma. This creates fertile ground for the character's evolution, which would not be mere restoration, but a deep transformation guided by experiences of pain, loss, and hope. While Gon deals with this internal journey, Hisoka continues to represent a living force of what none can become when death is overcome and the desire for power is renewed. His cold stance, lethal style, and adaptive ability are living testimony to Nun's malleability, which can transform in response to the most extreme challenges. Therefore, the future of Gon's Nun is an unknown waiting to be revealed, but carries the potential to be one of the most interesting and complex developments in the work. Whether he will make a vow similar to Kurapika's, whether his Nun will assume new and challenging forms, or whether his relationship with power will be mediated by entities or special states are questions that enrich the series' mythology and broaden the reflection on what it means to fight sacrifice and grow within the Hunter x Hunter universe. Along with all this, could he become a calamity, or something like Nanika, and have something of it within himself? This is a very interesting hypothesis, full of possibilities, within the Hunter x Hunter universe. The idea that Gon might, at some point, become something similar to a calamity, like Nanika, or carry something of her within him, involves a deep mixture of his Nun, his traumatic experience, and the mysterious nature of the series' supernatural entities. Nanika is an entity that inhabits a Luca, with almost divine powers, capable of granting wishes and manipulating reality, but which also brings enormous risks and a complex relationship with her host. What defines Nanika is not just the power itself, but the symbiotic and almost spiritual connection with a Luca, along with the restrictions and consequences that coexistence imposes. In Gon's case, after his extreme vow and the fragile condition he was left in, we can imagine his Nun being in a state far beyond the ordinary, with the potential to transform into something unique. If Gon absorbed or came into deep contact with a force similar to Nanika, whether through an entity from the Dark Continent, a manifestation of his own extreme will, or even some Nun-related event, he could indeed develop a kind of internal calamity. This could represent a fusion between his essence and a power that transcends traditional Nun, something carrying both the blessing of immense strength and the curse of unpredictable consequences. This transformation would bring great challenges for Gon. The risk of losing his humanity, the struggle to control a force that is not completely his own, and the need to balance this power to protect those he loves without being consumed by it. Similar to a Luca, who depends on care and love to keep Nanika under control, Gon would have to deal with this internal calamity very cautiously, and perhaps with external help, whether from friends or Nun masters. This hypothesis, although still speculative, fits perfectly with the philosophy of the work, which mixes growth, sacrifice, and mystery. It would be a way for Gon to evolve into something greater, but also more complex, with dramatic nuances that deepen his character and expand the horizons of the Hunter x Hunter universe. Thus, the comparison between Gon and Hisoka, bringing this up about Nanika, reveals not only different experiences with death and Nun, but also the multiple possibilities Togashi opens for the evolution of his characters, creating a narrative field where power, will, and sacrifice intertwine to build unique and unforgettable stories.